All right, we continue. So now let's talk about moments. While forces determine translational tendencies, moments or torques describe rotational tendencies. So before we continue, let me clarify. Moments and torques are somewhat being interchanged in um, many situations in physics. Okay, but these two doesn't necessarily mean the same things uh, are the same thing. So there's a slight difference. Moments are somewhat they are just at a certain moving at a certain rotating at a certain angle, while torques could be more than 360 degrees. They could rotate continuously. So if the rotational motion is just expected to be at some degrees only, typically less than 360, then we use the more appropriate term is moment. But if we can expect the rotational motion to be more than possibly, it could be possibly, it could possibly extend beyond 360, meaning it could have several revolutions, then it's better to use the term torque. Okay? When there are complete revolutions only, one or more revolutions on then we use torque instead of moment. But in terms of analysis, the concepts are the same. Okay? So we have such thing as the moment arm. So for example, if this is the pivot point and this is the force is applied here. So for example, this is one arm of our robotic system. So this is one arm. This is one segment of our robotic arm, and we applied a force here. Then, since this is the pivot point, this is somewhat fixed, and this one is not. Okay, so let me show. Okay, so if this is the pivot point and we apply a force here, right, just like in the image, we apply a force here, then the tendency is it will cause a rotational motion. So it will make this arm move downward. Okay? And okay, and that distance between the pivot point and the point of interaction is called an arm. Okay? Or specifically a moment arm. And that's what we compute. So that's what we use for our computation of the moment. So just like here, um, if we have a certain value, or 0.5 in this example, I guess, right, this is the pivot point, and then we have an interaction here. I guess this is the interaction. So in this image, let's say the pivot point is somewhere here, right? And the line of action, the force applied is this way. So, okay. Then, if this is the pivot point and this is the line of interaction, the rotation would most likely be like this. Okay. So we compute that the distance between the line of action and the pivot point is in this case 0.5. That's actually our moment arm. And we simply multiply that by um the corresponding vector component of our force. Or for example, if this is based on SOHCAHTOA, basic SOHCAHTOA and trigonometry, we can determine that if this is 10 Newton, then this length is actually uh, 10 sine theta. Okay, let's see. If this is theta, 30 degrees, so sine is opposite. All right. All right. No, no, this is the distance. All right. So this is considered the right. Uh, Correction. The moment arm is the perpendicular distance between that is formed between the arm and the line of action. So that's a correction. So this is the arm and then the line of action. It forms a triangle, and there would be a perpendicular distance between the pivot and the line of action. So that's the correct definition of our moment arm, the perpendicular distance. So this is our moment arm, not this one. This is just the arm, but the moment arm is the perpendicular distance. So perpendicular, it forms a 90 degrees. So in this case, the moment arm is this one. So SOHCAHTOA's sign of 30 is the D, the opposite over the adjacent is 1. Okay, so opposite, and so D is equals to 10, the Newton, times sine of 30. So that's why that we use that here, right? So again, we multiply the force applied, 10 newtons, by uh sine of 30 and the moment arm. So in this case, they use letter D instead of R. So zero point 0.5 times 10 sine 30. Okay, so that would be 2.5 Newton meters. So the unit SI unit of moment is Newton meter, right? So if we consider a force applied at a point whose position relative to a reference point 0 is described by the position vector r, and the moment of F about point 0 is defined as this one. So um the position vector multiplied by the force. And the magnitude of the moment is just this one, okay? And this expression is equivalent to, sometimes we use this symbol, okay? Where D is the moment arm or the perpendicular distance from point O to the line. This is the point O, our pivot, and the perpendicular distance to our line of action. Okay, so there's a force here, and this is the pivot point, so the perpendicular distance is the moment arm. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Now I mentioned the term torque. It is a specific type of moment associated primarily with twisting about an axis, and it is the rotational twisting effect that tends to produce angular acceleration about a shaft or axis, and this is common in dynamics and machine design. So that means in most cases, we use the term moment in statics, or the term moment is more often used in statics, while the term torque is more often used in dynamics. Okay, so because of the presence of angular acceleration. And we have an example here. I'm not sure why it's not moving. Okay, it's meant to move. They're shy. Right. Anyway, they will move in a while. Um, what else to say? So as you can see, the same principle with the moment actually. Um, just note that the net torque is proportional to both the angular acceleration and the object's resistance to rotational motion. So again, this is more on the concept of dynamics, right? So I just included it here because some textbooks, some online resources still use the term torque. Um, but it's okay, but just remember that torque is associated with angular acceleration, which means it is more involved in dynamics rather than in statics. Okay, so you can observe the illustration. This one supposedly moves, but I'm not sure why. Right. Anyway, we have another term here, a couple. So this is not a couple that we know. A couple consists of two parallel forces that, number one, have equal magnitude act in opposite directions and are separated by a perpendicular distance. So, for example, this force is acting on this surface or this object downward, while this one acting upward. So this force on the right provides rotation. So let me um, illustrate. If this is our pivot point at the center and we have an upward force here, then the possible move, um, the moment will be this is counterclockwise. Okay? Clockwise. While still the same situation, but this time the force is applied on the other end and it's downward. Okay? Although it's downward, the moment is still the same. Okay? If upward on one end, that meaning the upward force exerted on one end and the downward force on the other end will produce the same direction, the same rotational direction. Okay, they both in this case they are both producing a counterclockwise rotation. But if those two forces, if this force and this force are have equal magnitude, then they could be considered a couple, right? So and at the same time, they are separated by this perpendicular distance. So in a couple, the net force of a couple is zero. Okay, because they have equal magnitude but opposite directions, as you can see. So if this is 5 newtons, and this one is negative 5 newtons, then they will cancel each other in terms of force. That means um, although we apply force here and we apply force here, then the we cannot expect the object to move either upward or downward. So there's no translational motion because their effect has been canceled or they cancel each other's effect. Okay, but they produce a rotation. Okay, so um, we can compute that still the computation is just the product of the force applied and then the moment arm. Okay, so in this case, if this is the line of action and this is the pivot point, so we use this one. This is the perpendicular distance. This is the perpendicular distance from here up to the line of action. So this is the moment arm. Okay, perpendicular because it forms 90 degrees. Okay. Um, Take note that a couple has several important characteristics. It produces pure rotation without translation. Its moment is independent of the reference point, and it is a free vector. It can be moved anywhere on the rigid body without changing its effect. So meaning if we change um, this couple, if we narrow their distance between each other or we separate them farther, regardless, the effect would be the same. Okay, so what else? Okay, for example, you can see that when you do kayak, if you happen to try kayak, then you actually use um force I mean a couple you apply a couple to perform some rotational motion in your kayaking. Okay, same thing when we drive our handle our steering wheel. Okay, we pull on one end, we pull on the other, or I mean we pull down on one end and we pull up on the other end if we want to turn. Okay, so when we do that, the effect on the car is of course to perform a rotational motion. Okay, and then if you do the same, if you pull up and pull down on the other, then there will be a different an opposite rotational motion. Okay, so that's an example of a couple, and they are usually um, considered also in our analysis of static equilibrium. Okay, now we have some examples here. You can take a screenshot, but I'll just go through. I'll try to make it quick. Um, right? So, for example, this is the scenario. We have a suspended mass, a suspended object, meaning an object attached to a string on a rigid platform. So, if this is the rigid surface or platform, and we have a string attached to an object, okay, or does these two strings support this object? Okay, meaning the object is hanging through these strings or cables. Then, um, okay, so the question is, a small pan of mass, okay, this one, 42 grams, is supported by two strings, this shorter one and the longer one, shown in the figure, and the maximum tension that the string can support is 2.8 newtons. And the mass is added gradually to the pan until one of the strings snaps. So you want to add more and more mass. Um, so the question is, which string will snap first, the shorter one or the longer one? And how much mass must be added for this to occur? Okay, so now remember that this mechanical system consisting of strings, masses, and the pan is in static equilibrium. Okay, so once as long as they don't snap, we can expect the object to remain at rest. Okay, it is in static equilibrium. Specifically, the knot that ties the strings to the pan is in static equilibrium and can be treated as a point. So in this case, this intersection is the knot, and we consider that as a point for simplicity. So we don't consider the dimension of our object. So we just consider the point here. So this point has a mass, okay, which means it has a weight. And the weight can be computed as the mass, the actual mass, the plus the additional mass times together by the gravitational constant or the acceleration due to gravity, which is 9.81 meters per second squared. Okay, so um, now, since we consider it as a point, therefore we need only the first equilibrium condition. So we are not talking about moments at this example, okay, for simplicity. And the three forces pulling at the nut are the tension, um, of course, and the weight, right? So we have three vectors, the weight, the weight, the tension one, okay, the tension here, and the tension on this string. So T1 and T2. So we have the weight and T1 and T2. So in my case, I prefer to compute this two, or we use this one. And also I prefer to convert everything to SI before I proceed with the calculations. So um, as long as it's not stated in the problem, I suggest convert it in SI before you compute. Okay? Except in some special situations where it's better not to convert. Okay? Um, but in this case, I suggest convert to SI first. That's why 42 kilograms, 42 grams is actually 0.042 kilograms. And then we expect our mass to be in kilograms as well. So we don't know the value of the mass yet. We have to compute for that. And but we know the G, which is 9.81 meters per second squared. Now, we have the tensions 1 and 2, so they are vectors. Tension 1 is this string. So it has a magnitude and a direction. So the direction is, I suggest we always refer to the positive x-axis. So how much angle does it um, have from the x-axis? So let me annotate. Okay, so let's choose a different color. All right. So from the positive x-axis up to T1, so how many degrees is the rotation? Okay, so how many degrees is that? Right? And since we have a given alpha 1, okay, if this is alpha 1, then from here up to here, from positive x to the negative x-axis, the rotation is 180 degrees. Okay, therefore, this angle, this orange thing, and alpha 1 are what we call, I lost the term. Supplementary angles. Okay, meaning two angles that form 180 degrees. So if this is alpha 1, then the orange one here is 180 minus alpha 1. Okay, so that's instead of using another variable, I choose 180 of minus alpha 1 instead. Okay, and then we have tension 2. So tension 2 is right here. So as you can see, from the positive x-axis, the angle is only alpha 2. So no need to subtract it from 180. So, okay. So these are our vectors. We have the weight, which is going downward. And then we have the tension 1, okay, at this angle, and tension 2 at this angle. Right? So if we um, restructure this FBD into a triangle so that we can determine the lengths, then um, we have this one. So this is the side for the tension 1, and this is the side for the tension 2. Okay, so using principles of algebra, if this is angle 1, just like what we had earlier, then this one is angle 1. In, I know, not algebra, geometry. In geometry, we have the thing called opposite vectors are congruent. So if this is meaning if this line is parallel with this line, then this angle and this angle are the same. Okay, they are congruent. Okay, and same thing here, that this angle and the opposite here are the same. Okay, so that's why we can use theta 1 and theta 2 also in these triangles. Now, since we know that the string is 5 centimeters long here, and this one is 2 centimeters long here, then we can use our SOHCAHTOA to measure the angles. We can derive the angles using the lengths of our legs. Okay, these are the legs of our triangle. So I choose alpha 1 as our reference angle. So if this is our alpha 1, then we have the opposite. This one is the opposite, and this one is the adjacent. So opposite and adjacent, therefore we use tangent TOA. So tangent of alpha 1 is opposite, which is opposite to this angle is this side or this leg, which is 10. Okay? And adjacent to this angle is this one. It's 5. Okay, so why not this one? Because this is the hypotenuse, okay, not the adjacent side. So 10 over 5, that is, 10 over 5 is, okay, this is a shortcut. So if tangent alpha 1 is 10 over 5 or 2, then alpha 1 is arctangent of 2. So if you compute that using your calculator, then alpha 1 is 63.43 degrees. Okay. On the other hand, we have alpha 2. So okay, this one is alpha 2. Okay. And the opposite of it is 5. Okay, so 5. And the adjacent is 10. So 5 over 10, that is zero point 0.5, and the arctangent of zero point 0.5 is 26.57. Okay. Now, to double check before we proceed, these two angles um, must have a sum of 90 degrees because if this is a right triangle, then the other two angles must have a sum of 90 degrees, or they must be complementary angles. So the sum of 63.43 and 26.57, if you check, that's exactly 90 degrees. Right? So meaning at this point we are correct. We are doing it right. Now, since we have alpha 1 and alpha 2, we can actually derive the this part. Okay? We can now substitute alpha 1 and alpha 2 to to specify our vectors. So our tension 1 has, okay, we don't know the magnitude yet, but we know the angle now. Okay, it's 180 minus 63.43. That is 116.57. Whereas in our tension 2, we just simply copy the alpha 2, which is 26.57. Okay, now that we have the angles, we can now use the first condition of equilibrium to determine the relationships between alpha 1, tension 1, tension 2, and the weight. Okay, so in the next slide, we have this thing. Okay, let me close the annotation first. Clear all drawings, then close. Right, next we have, oh, I forgot. Okay, these are the three forces that we are talking about. And then, okay, still the same illustrations. We have the first condition of equilibrium. Sum of all forces must be zero. And we take only, since this is a two-dimensional analysis, we consider only the sum of forces on the x-axis and the sum of forces on the y-axis. Okay, so in the sum of forces on x-axis, we have here, okay, first the x component of the weight, which becomes zero because the cosine of the angle from the x-axis to the weight is negative 90 degrees or 270 degrees. So if you compute the cosine of negative 90 or the cosine of 270, that will be zero. So regardless of the weight, the x component is always zero. Okay? X component of the weight is always zero. So I just included it here to show you what happened to the weight. Why do most textbooks always disregard the weight when we are talking about the X components or the sum of the X components of forces? Okay, so here, in short, I will let discuss how it was derived. But in short, if we always refer to the positive x as our starting point of our rotation of our angles, then we can now we can always say that x components use cosine while y components use sine. Okay, if all our angles start with the positive x axis. That's why I always measure from the positive x axis. Okay, that's why earlier instead of alpha 1, I used 180 minus alpha 1 because that's the angle from here up to here. Okay, now that's for T1. So from here up to here, that's 180 minus alpha 1 or 116.57. And then for T2, that's from here up to here, the only angle is alpha 2. So directly 26.57. So if we simplify it, then we can come up with this relationship between the two. Okay, in short, T1 is basically equal to twice of T2, right? And at T1, um, okay, between the two, the one that's larger is 2.8. So if you go back to the given problem, um, the maximum tension that the string can support is 2.8 Newton. Then therefore, none of T1 nor T2 must have a tension that is greater than 2.8. So in this case, since we have this relationship, we have discovered this relationship, then we can conclude that T1 is greater than T2. So that means it has the maximum tension. So if T1 is 2.8 or the maximum tension, then T2 will be 1.4. Okay, you use your algebra how um to derive that. Okay? So if you check 1.4 times 2, that's 2.8. Okay? Now, before we use that, we should have the analysis on the y components of the forces. Now, still we have the weight, the tension 1 and tension 2, but this time we have the y components. Therefore, we use, instead of cosine, we use sine. Okay? So now we have the weight, and then we have the sine of 270, that is I think -1. All right. So we have the weight earlier shown here. This is our weight. Okay, we just multiply it by -1. That's why it becomes this thing. Okay, so this is the weight times -1. -1 is from the sine of 270 degrees. That's why in many textbooks, if not all, um, the weight is always negative. Okay? It's always represented as negative because the direction is 270 degrees from the x-axis, 270, or negative. If you measure clockwise, that is -90. So sine of -90 or sine of 270 is -1. So that's why our weight became negative. Now we have the T1 sine of this. Simplify that, it becomes this coefficient. And for T2, this is this sine of 26.57. Simplify that, you have this coefficient for T2. Okay? Simplify it further, or substituting T1 and T2 here. From here, we replace T1 and T2 by 2.8 and 1.4 respectively. And then simplify, we come up with our value of m. So since we use the maximum value of the T1, then therefore the corresponding m is also the maximum mass that we can add. Okay, so now the answer is 0.2771 kilograms. But if you express that in terms of grams, of course, you just move 3 places to the right. So it's equal to 277.1 grams. Okay, now significance. Um, Suppose that the mechanical system considered on this example is attached to a ceiling inside an elevator going up. So, as long as the elevator moves up at a constant speed, the result stays the same because the weight does not change. And if the elevator moves up with acceleration, the critical mass is smaller because the weight of m, the original mass, and the additional mass becomes larger by an apparent weight due to the acceleration of the elevator. Still, in all cases, the shorter string breaks first. So if you can't get this illustration, just remember, um, regardless of the motion of the object, regardless of the situation, if we have this configuration, the shorter one will always break first. Okay, because it's the one that experiences more tension than the other. Okay, so that's regarding suspended mass. Okay, now we have another example. This time the mass is no longer suspended on a string, but resting on an inclined plane. So this is our inclined plane and this is our mass. So as you can see, we have these contact forces acting on it. Okay, of course, it has the weight which is always downward, by the way. Okay, the weight, the corresponding normal force and friction on the surface, and then we have the applied force. So now, the problem says a 12-kilogram block sits on a rough inclined plane that makes an angle of 25 degrees with the horizontal. So this angle is 25 degrees. Okay, if the coefficient of static friction between the block and the surface is 0.50, then determine the maximum magnitude of the applied force A that can be exerted without causing the block to slide down the incline. So meaning we possibly we use a string or anything that will um, pull it down without either pull it down or maybe we can apply the force here, a push force, either a push force here or a pull force here on the other side, as long as it doesn't slide down, meaning it stays on this position, right? Meaning, in other words, we are looking for the applied force or the magnitude of the applied force that can be exerted without changing the or without affecting the state of equilibrium of our box, right? So with that, one of the first things that we do is the FBD, free body diagram. So here we analyze all the forces, all the contact forces acting on it are here. First, we have the weight. Okay. You have noticed we have to rotate, right? So for simplicity, this now becomes our x-axis, our new x-axis, and our new y-axis. Okay, so for simplicity, we rotated it. And here we have these vectors. We have the weight, right, which is given. The mass is given. That's why we can come up with this um, um, corresponding weight, numerical value of our weight. Okay, and also our weight has corresponding angle. It's no longer 270 degrees because if it's 270 degrees, this will be our weight. But since we have the rule, we have the law that the weight will always point downward regardless of the location of our object. So even though it is in an inclined plane, the weight will still go downward. So this time, it's no longer 270 degrees, but this um angle only. Now we have to derive that angle. So okay. In short, using the concepts of geometry and trigonometry, we can conclude that this angle is the same as this angle. Okay. All right. So that's for shortcut. And if this is theta, that means this is 270 degrees. Okay. This from here up to here is 270 degrees. So we just subtract theta so that we can get this angle. Okay, so this is 270 degrees. We call that alpha. So 270 degrees minus theta. But we know theta already to be 25 degrees. So our alpha now is 270 degrees minus 25 or 245 degrees. Okay. Now with that with that given information, we now do the analysis of the x and y components of our forces. So on the for the x components, we have this summation of forces. We have the x component of the friction, x component of the normal force, x component of the applied force, and the x component of the weight. So for the friction, friction is along the surface. This is the surface. So it's along the surface. That's why it's 0 degrees away from the x-axis. Okay. While the normal force is 90 degrees from the x. Um, Let me annotate. From here up to here, it's from okay, let me from here up to here. it's 90 degrees. Okay, that's why we have 90. And then our applied force is from here. Okay, let me use another color. Applied force is from here up to here. So that's why it's 180 degrees. While our weight, okay, this is our weight, and the angle is 245 degrees because it's from here, the color blue, from here up to here. So 245. Now we simplify that. Cosine of 0. Alright, we clear out our weights. Right. Now, cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine of 90 is 0. Cosine of 180 is negative 1. And cosine of 245 degrees is negative 0.42. Now, if we simplify it further, we have FR. Okay, this will be eliminated. So we now have only negative FA. So FR minus FA minus the product of this, which is 49.44. Okay, just in case you wonder why minus, because positive times negative is negative. So it's not minus, right? If we rearrange this, then for some reasons I want FA to be on the other end for simplicity. So if we isolate FA on the other side, then what remains are FR and minus 49.44. Okay, let this be our equation 1, and we will use that later. Right. Now, for the y components, um, still the same. Okay, we have the same contact forces, but this time we are instead of using cosine, we are now using sine. So I see this is the convenience of sticking to the positive x axis always, because we can simplify with the we no longer have to memorize so many rules or so many formula, and we can simply change from cosine to sine. Okay, so now for the friction, we have sine 0 because okay, the angles are the same. So just simplify. Sine 0 is 0, sine of 90 is 1, sine of 180 is 0, and sine of 245 is negative 0.91. Okay, simplify this, we can actually derive the value of our normal force, which is 107.12. Okay, newtons. And using the formula or the relationship between the normal force and the friction, we can also derive the friction, which we will use also to derive the applied force. So we compute for the friction. The static coefficient of friction is 0.5, so we use it here. And then the computed normal force, N or our Fn, is 107.12. Um, okay, I forgot to change Fn. This should be Fn. Okay. Um, So we have our friction is 53.56, and we substitute that to equation 1. So 53.56 minus 49.44, that is 4.12 newtons. So this is the maximum force that we can apply, either a pulling force or a pushing force to the box. That's the maximum force that we can apply so that the box will remain on that position. It will not slide down. Okay, that's for our second example. Let me know if you need more clarifications. You can comment down or message me for your questions. Okay. We have two more examples, I guess. But I let's have that in our fourth and last part of this module.